Hello. Many people who normally never read medieval theologians or textbooks written in Latin in the 11th century know of Anselm, and they know of a single book he wrote with a strange Greek title, Proslogion. The Proslogion is a long work, and yet it has 3 short chapters at the beginning which have often been extracted and are presented as if this is the kernel of Anselm's thought. Dr. Karen Kilby has a position on these famous chapters, and so Karen, tell me about the Proslogion and your take on Anselm.
Well, this is a book that I read year after year in teaching, and increasingly I've been struck by Anselm's own explanation of why he writes the book. So normally, as you say, these 3 chapters are extracted. They're read as the ontological argument. You never find the word ontological argument in Anselm. In fact, I think that terminology comes from Immanuel Kant, who classified proofs for the existence of God and called Anselm's the ontological argument. And as you say, he doesn't treat it as a separate thing, but it's part of a continuous book. So I've been struck reading and rereading this text over the years that in his own introduction to it, he gives a very particular reason for why he wanted to write the book. He talks about having written a previous text called the Monologion, in which he gave reasons for the things that we believe, and being dissatisfied with his previous text because he had to give many different reasons. And he wanted to look for one reason, one ratio. So first of all, the thing to say there is that what he's concerned with is not whether or not God exists, whether or not we can prove it. What his concern is in the Proslogion, I think, is intellectual elegance. It's the kind of beauty of the thing. He wants to bring out the beauty, the inner beauty and coherence of the Christian faith by being able to give a single to find a single principle from which he can prove things, or run us through, establish things, deduce what he wants to deduce. And he then says in his introduction that he struggled to find this. He felt he wanted to find a single argument, and he couldn't, and he got very frustrated, and he eventually gives up. And then when he stops trying, suddenly it comes to him. And the thing that's always struck me about this, because I have a past as a mathematician, is it nearly exactly replicates a very, very famous description of mathematical discovery given by Henri Poincaré, who talks about struggling with something, and then later on, just as he's on the first step of going into a bus, he suddenly gets a wonderful idea. So the sense that you work hard on something, it frustrates you, and then when you're not looking, an answer comes. So if you think of Anselm, because the mathematicians also seek kind of elegance and coherence in what they do. So there's some kind of aesthetic driving Anselm for the inner beauty of what's believed that he wants to bring out. And this is why he's so pleased when eventually, when he's praying, I think, or saying the Psalms or something, it comes to him, this one ratio, this one principle or argument with which he's going to unite all the things that he wants to demonstrate of the faith, which is, of course, the famous notion that you can speak about God as that than which nothing greater can be conceived. And so I think that what really pleases him is not, I've found a nifty little very short argument that's going to baffle Bertrand Russell later on to prove that everyone must believe in God. What really pleases him is, I've found this single principle from which all the things that I need to say I can deduce, all from one. It's the coherence and the unity that for him the emphasis is on. And it's because we read in a post-Cartesian way where we think everything is about us proving the first principle, and not everyone believes in God, and we're going to find a way to make them believe in God, that we've started to extract these opening chapters and look at them on their own.
It's very interesting because there's you can read the Proslogion beginning at the beginning, or you can begin at the end. And I tend to begin at the end. Anselm wrote in Bec in Normandy, but such was his fame that no sooner had he written the book than Guanillo, the abbot of Marmoutier, and Marmoutier is just outside Strasbourg, so the other side of what present-day France, attacks the book and says, "Oh, but you failed to prove your case." And Guanillo, in many ways, reads Anselm's book in the way that a lot of modern philosophers and a lot of post-Cartesian theologians read it, as if he's trying to prove, can I show you that there is this being I cannot see? And Anselm attacks Guanillo and says, "I'm not even prepared to deal with you on this, because it is only the fool who can say that God is not." And he's there actually quoting the Psalms. So he's quoting a scriptural text as his authority. And he says, and you can't be that fool because you are a Christian. And so he won't even allow Guanillo to take up the logical position, am I going to ask the question, can God's existence be proven? And that leads to, since he won't argue with Guanillo, and he says, because you cannot be a fool, that leads to the question then, why is the fool invoked? And the fool in the Psalms and the fool in other parts of Scripture that he's using, that the scriptural fool is not the fool who just doesn't say God is not, but he's the fool who can live with contradictions. And so it's only someone who can live with contradictions and that would strengthen your case, that it's a single argument. In other words, you can have this elegance, because fools believe in contradictions, fools need to have many ideas, but he has this elegance of a single idea. And so he's going to spill theology out of this notion that is elegant, that God has such a quality of being that it cannot not be. And so it's funny, you come at it from one angle, I come at it from a completely different angle, but I think we're in agreement actually that it's not one of these sort of knockdown proofs. Is there one of these things in the universe? But it's actually seeking out what makes the being of God unique. And what makes the being of God unique is that you can think of your own being. Okay, I'm thinking of it now. And as soon as I think of my own being, I may not like the idea, but I have to think about its finitude. There was a time when I was not, and there will be a time when, within the perceptual universe I live in, I will not be. Whereas I cannot think of the being of God and also think of that being as not existing. So in a way, the old logical saw, how can you think of a being that is greater than all beings, also fails, because the elegance of Anselm's demonstration is the via negativa. I don't have to conceive positively of the being that cannot not be, but I conceive of my own being, and then I conceive of the difference between my being and the being of God, in that God is without that. And I think when you actually read the Proslogion, on the assumption that he's not trying to prove thesis one in a mathematical argument, or get down to the axiomatic basis, you see that starting with the nature of God as infinite, which is a negative notion, you then can spill out the whole of Christian theology, and it's a far richer reading of Anselm.
So yes. So that I think I can agree with all of that. That he's not. The concern is not everyone agrees with me, or I'm not sure if I'm right, so I'm going to find an argument to establish that it really is true that God exists, and I found a nifty one. the concern living within the context of Christian faith, which one is not willing to step out of. In other words, I'm not going to pretend you're a fool, Ganilo, you're a Christian. Living within that context, how to think about God, how to think in unity about the different aspects in an integrated way about the different things that a Christian believes, how to see something of the inner richness. Well, you can't see the inner richness of God's being, but how to think around it and with it anyways.
And then to conclude that within the history of philosophy, the ontological argument has a good long history and no doubt will be used as a way of sharpening the intellectual wits of students for generations to come. But in a sense, leave that as an academic exercise and try and read Anselm and hear his own authentic voice.
Because there's something very interesting there.
Yeah. Karen, thanks for coming and talking with me today.
Thank you.